#UseTheNews. And it is about the most comprehensive study done yet by many different and usually competing stakeholders in the German news industry. I look forward to listening to that and about its particular focus on media literacy. Here we go, #UseTheNews.
Yeah, thank you, welcome. My name is Meinolf Enders. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of DPA, the German news agency, and we are the initiator and coordinator of the Use the News project. This is a pretty unique cooperation, actually, because we succeeded in bringing together many relevant players from the German news and information ecosystem. So ranging from public TV and radio, via private TV and radio, and several publishers, media authorities. And the idea is, what can we do to tackle the growing erosion in news literacy, especially among Generation Z and millennials? This is really causing big headaches, not only for media managers and journalists, but also for politicians, for our democracy, because it has a lot to do with the question, can we build our future on an informed society? And this is no longer something we can take for granted. So what we did in this project was, first of all, we did a nationwide study to learn about the news usage and the news competency and literacy in the age group 14 to 24. And Leonie Wunderlich from the Leibniz Institute will present a couple of the results in a minute. Secondly, we added the News Literacy Lab because we thought it's no longer enough to see all these maybe concerning or alarming data and results about the erosion in news usage, but at the same time, we have to do something about it. And we believe it has to start in the newsrooms. It has to start in creating and building the right information portfolios for the young age groups in order to keep them in the news. And finally, the third column, the third pillar of Use the News is the open news education part, where we want to create and establish completely new concepts to teach and educate news literacy in schools. So in order to provide you with some food for thought and some real insights, I would like to hand over to Leonie Wunderlich to show us a couple of the results from the Use the News study. Over to you, Leonie.
Thank you, Meinolf, and hello to everyone. Also, on behalf of my two colleagues, Sascha Höhlig and Uwe Hasebrink, I will provide some insights into what we did in our study and present you some key findings. So let's begin. I don't see the presentation yet. Okay, click. Yes, as we all know, in today's hybrid media environment, the production, distribution, and the use of news are changing. What is great in principle, because new information and communication technologies hold great potential for the comprehensive information and social participation of many people. But we can also observe some negative developments, such as a declining reach of news media, a low willingness to pay for digital news, trends in news avoidance in parts of the population, as well as increasing incidental news contacts via social media platforms and dissemination of targeted false news. Click. Against this background, the German press agency, together with the Department for Media Culture of the City of Hamburg and our institute, started the News initiative. At the Leibniz Institute, we wanted to research how especially young people in Germany use news, how news literate they are, and what journalism plays in all of this. Next slide. Click. and click. So more specifically, we asked what different patterns of news literacy can be observed among adolescents and young adults, and what difference does it make where and how young people get information. But what is news literacy? So we conceptualize news literacy less as a one-dimensional characteristic that can be either high or low. Rather, we think that news literacy can be determined against the social background of a person, as the interplay between interest and attitudes towards news, the actual information, behavior, and use of news, the relevance of sources for opinion forming, and the informedness of a person. So, as a whole, this conceptualization of news literacy considers all news related practices with a special focus of the role of journalistic and non journalistic sources within these practices. In order to investigate our key questions, we conducted 8 focus groups with teenagers 14 to 17 years old and young adults in the age of 18 to 24 years. And these young people have grown up in an online environment and thus adapted to mobile communication, information, and social media platforms. In contrast to this, we also spoke to adults 40 to 50 years old who have grown up in a print and broadcast dominated news environment. In our representative face-to-face survey, we also draw on 500 persons of each age group. And now I'm going to talk of some results of our face-to-face survey. Now, we derived 4 variables from our conceptualization of news literacy. The first one is interest and attitude towards news, information. The use of journalistic and non-journalistic sources, the relevance of these sources for opinion forming, and the perceived informedness of a person. Applying a factor analysis, which is too detailed to present here in this context, we identified 2 latent dimensions which can either be high or low expressed. And on this basis, we were able to determine 4 distinct types of information seeker. On the one hand, there are young people who are not interested in news, don't use either journalistic or non-journalistic sources, and therefore feel not well informed. In contrast to this, we see that there are young people who are very interested in news, who use both journalistic and non-journalistic sources to inform themselves and thus feel well informed. Third, we see young people who show also a high interest in news and use almost entirely journalistic sources. For them, journalism also plays a major role in their process of opinion forming. And we see young people who are moderately interested in news, but who mainly rely on non-journalistic sources such as influencers, stars, or other actors. And we named these different types of information seeker. Next slide, yes. The low-oriented information seeker, the comprehensive-oriented information seeker, the journalistic-oriented and non-journalistic-oriented information seeker. Next slide. So it is important to note that this very constant pattern, we can observe this in all different types, in all different groups of age and of education. Of course, the distribution of the type of information seeker varies within these age groups, independent also from formal education. But overall, we can see that the proportion of people who obtain information exclusively from non-journalistic sources, such as influencers and stars, is low and decreases with age. But time's short, so I want to set a spotlight on just on irrelevant actors and sources on social media platforms for teenagers. Next slide. Now, we can see that young people from all types of information seeker follow their friends and family on social media. But especially for comprehensive oriented and non-journalistic oriented information seeker, sources like influencers or stars are very important. They use them to get their information. Whereas on the other hand, journalistic oriented information seeker also follow on social media platforms journalistic outlets as well as certain journalists. But in general, one can say that on social media platforms in particular, journalistic offers are only bycatch. Thus, it is highly relevant that journalism and journalistic products are distinctive from other content on these platforms, and journalism has to provide the user with benefit and make clear why journalism is the relevant source for information. Next slide. Yeah, since I cannot present all charts in details, I just want to give you a short last overview of our key findings. First, young people inform themselves in very different ways. Even within the same age and education groups, very different types of news seeker are evident. Journalistic, low, comprehensive, and non-journalistic information seeker with specific characteristics of interest and use, attributed relevance for opinion formation and informedness. Young people use journalistic offerings as one source for information. So journalism plays a role for many young people in Germany, mainly via the respective specific offerings online and less via social media platforms. But non-journalistic actors are also relevant for forming opinions for many young people equally and for a few exclusively. Next slide. In general, there's limited interest in hard news topics. Many young people lack a connection to their own everyday life and arguments as to why it is important to inform themselves as well. So adolescents and young adults who use journalistic sources know more about politics, media, and current events, regardless of age and education. And last, comprehensive and non-journalistic information seeker are almost likely to participate on social media platforms. But the largest proportion of young people and their social reality are not perceptible on social media platforms. Thus, be aware of false conclusions, for example, with regard to the overall need for interaction. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. This was only a very, very small spotlight on our findings. If you're interested in more details, you can find the full report online on our website or just send me an email. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Leonie. I have to say the key message that hit us as the consortium, as the media partners here, was the disconnect between young adults and news. So mainly, I would say, if I summarize the study, almost 50% of the young people between 14 and 25 tell us, I don't know why news and information is relevant for my life anymore. And now you have to keep in mind, public broadcasters, public radio, financed by people's money, of course, they are eager and ambitious to make these young audiences their future core audiences, and they can't afford to lose on them. And the same is true, of course, for private media, for newspaper publishers who need all these young adults as future subscribers. So we are faced with a tremendous challenge here, and this is exactly what created the agenda of the News Literacy Lab. And so I'm happy to have two representatives of these two media groups here that represent the industry. And I would like to start with Björn. Björn Staschen is the innovative and digital mastermind behind the activities of NDR. The NDR is the public TV and radio broadcaster for Northern Germany. And Björn, please tell us, what are the consequences that you are taking at NDR? And maybe you could also give us some background. In the lab, we worked in so-called tracks. And you were very engaged and active in a track called collaboration. So maybe you could give us a little bit a background on what you did in this track.
Definitely, Manov. Thank you very much for having me. And I want to, first of all, stress a point that you already made, because it is interesting to notice public service broadcasters financed by a license fee, as well as publishers, they might be competitors, but they have a common goal, which is important. And we connected over this common goal to reach the whole of society, including young people, as well as other audiences that might feel left behind in these days. So the motives might not necessarily be the same. Publishers need monetization, public service broadcasters financed by license fee need to offer programs for the whole of society because the whole of society is financing it. But, you know, the common goal is the same, and that made this collaboration in the Youth for News project special for me. And I was surprised, and I really liked how openly we managed to cooperate in the news project. On the one hand, we got a big load of data that Leonie just introduced us to. Very interesting. One key finding for me as well, as for others, is the role of friends and family in the information diet. While there's a substantial group of young people that doesn't use classical news media, apart from the social media channels and influencers, also friends and family play a vital role. That might be an interesting hook that we didn't take into consideration so far when we were developing formats. So what did we do in the collaboration tech and the collaboration project? We tried out and we failed and we succeeded a little bit. In our track, we collaborated with Der Spiegel, the nationwide political magazine, Ostfriesen Zeitung and Hamburger Abendblatt, two regional newspapers, one in a city, one rather in a rural region of Germany, and Norddeutscher Rundfunk, which is broadcasting for the whole of the north in Germany. And we tried to collaborate with young audiences. As we noticed, it'll not help us if we talk to each other in order to find them. So the key findings were, you know, you don't touch our lives anymore. So in order to touch lives of young people, we need to get in touch with them. So that is the first thing that we did. We held lots of talks and discussions with young people, for example, from youth press organizations. Still, it was very difficult to bridge the divide to young people that don't use us anymore, and possibly with parents who don't use us anymore. So it wasn't easy to lead these discussions, but we tried our best, and I think we got some very interesting findings. And in order to define the scope for our project, these talks were very important. We tried to talk on eye level. So we didn't kind of get back to the typical reaction of young people criticize something in the media and we just tell them why it is right how we do it. No, we listened and we took in and we tried to adopt. In the end, for our little project, and it was only a little project, we chose a current theme, Corona, as we wanted to touch everyday life of young people. We asked for their opinions and we asked for how they feel themselves in the Corona discussion represented in classical media. We got video, text, and audio. The results were very interesting. We got very valuable, very open statements, for example, from students who said, you know, we don't play a role in this discussion at all that is led in the classical media. You're talking about school children, you're talking about older people, about the workplace, but where are we, the students? So that gave us an interesting perspective. But we didn't get a lot of response. That was also an interesting finding because we used the channels that we know are not used by a younger audience. So this experiment also proved the assumption that we need to develop new channels to reach a younger audience. So it's not about products on our channels, but it's also about new channels in order to reach young people or other segments of an audience, by the way. The thing we all theoretically know, but haven't transferred into our everyday routine so far. And I think this project will help us. And we exchange a lot about things we develop in our own broadcasting company, publishing houses. And I think kind of we leave this project strong with a better belief and knowledge about what we need to do in order to broadcast and in order to publish for the whole of society.
Thank you, Björn. So talking about all the needs for change in journalism and the way to address the young audience, get rid of the old sender-receiver principle where media used to send in one direction and we never waited for an echo or any reaction. So coming over to Julia Lummer, she is the chief editor digital at Verlagsgruppe Rhein-Main, which is the regional newspaper publisher for the Frankfurt region. And Julia, please tell us, you are, I guess, your newspaper company was a pioneer in reaching out to young audiences already on print. You did a couple of groundbreaking activities in the German newspaper industry. So where are you currently? What did you learn so far from Use the News? And how are you changing VRM journalism these days to still keep the young audiences in the news?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Meinolf, as well, and thanks you for having me here. Yes, I think, like Björn said, for us, we are concentrating on digital subscriptions as well, as many publishers are doing that. But we are aware that we need content which increase the audience, and for this audience, of course, it's very important to have the young audience in our face, because these are the future people we would like to address, and now we have the possibility to show them why journalism, and for us regional and local journalism, is very important, and why they find interesting stuff from our side. So of course we started and think about how could we address this young audience, and of course we are doing Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. But with the project we started to build up YouTube and to focus more on that YouTube formats. And what we did is to have one young reporter, it's Julia Kleiner, which was part of the project as well. And she decided to start a new format, we call it News Up, where we say, with the focus of the young people, what are their topics in the daily life, like Leonie said, and put them in a weekly YouTube format, we call it News Up. But we quickly learned that on YouTube, the audience didn't like that weekly format. So we started again on TikTok and created a TikTok channel with News Up. And today we are in the point that we have on TikTok more or less every day some news, regional news as well. And on YouTube we have more fact news. That means we are giving them more background to a topic and shows them how this topic fits in their daily life. So that was one of the aspects we learned from the study. So as well, we put the young people in our editorial team in this project and let them do. So that means we have some media designers, which are trainees, and they are doing the graphics and stuff like that. So it's very fast, it's very very quick. So that's fitting to the use, and it's completely different to what we are doing in other parts in our company. As well, besides News Up, we have another format where we put young people in the video format. They say what happened to their life, and in these two formats we use gender. That means that's something new for us as well, because we do not use gender in any of our products, but here we use it, and we get a very good feedback from a young audience, where we heard in the study for them it's normal to have this gender topic. So I think these are 2 points, what we learned and what we put back in our company. As well, of course, just to add 1 point is that when we are looking to the new persons we would like to address and to get as journalists, we often get the feedback in the job training or in the job talkings that they refer to these 2 products, to these 2 formats. And I think that's very important for us as well as a company to show young journalists what's happening in a regional company as well. So I would say these are some learnings we get out from this topic, besides a lot of other stuff we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you for these great insights, Jule. So with a little time left, since we were all very disciplined here, I would like to introduce Anja. Anja is in charge of communication at the German Publishers Association, and the German Publishers Association, BDZV, was one of the key partners so far of the Use the News project. So Anja, with ending the session, it would be kind if you could first of all tell us from the German newspaper industry perspective, what did the industry learn so far, and especially can you give a little outlook? I mean, this apparently has been a great achievement, the project, the study. Could you give us a little outlook? What could be next? How will you continue to work on Use the News?
Oh, that's a big question. Actually, I would like to point out first that the usual reaction to news like this, the young don't read us anymore, they don't watch us anymore, they don't listen to us anymore, is bemoaning the fact. And then trying to instill something pedagogical to make all those young people listen. And what we loved about Use the News and why the news industry, the newspaper industry dug in, was we thought, hey, this is a positive approach. We won't, and we don't bemoan. We go forward and we are looking at the young people, we are talking to the young people, we don't talk about them. That's probably the most important thing in all this study. And the second, Björn already pointed that out, was usually the traditional media are competing with each other, and we are competing heavily. But in this study, all of us work together to a common goal. And actually, that's the idea for the future as well. Working together, finding out how to be newsworthy, not only to the young, but to everybody. And looking at the community and at our place in the community to democratic goal in the effect. That's where we are going, hopefully, and that's why we are wishing all the luck to Use the News.
Okay, so yeah, and I don't tell any secrets here. We in fact are planning for the near future. Most of the partners have already indicated that they will stay in, and we plan for the next 3 or 4 years, because we all agree in this group that this is a challenge that is so huge for everyone here. Our future is depending on how we solve this challenge. So we are in contact even with partners outside Germany, with a news literacy project in the USA, with the Reuters Institute in Oxford, because we see that the question, how can we keep the young generation in the news, is an overall challenge for democracy and media and journalism worldwide. So stay tuned. I hope we can provide you with more information in the time to come. And thanks for listening. Thanks everybody here for your contributions. Bye.
Bye.